All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. Happy to be here. My name is Meiran Galis, the CEO of Scytale, and I'm very happy to host over here these great guys. And we'll start with maybe a short introduction about what we are going to discuss today. So we will be speaking about security compliance and specifically about SOC 2 and how companies can implement compliance at scale. So maybe you can take the lead, the CSA chairman of Israel, Mr. Moshe Ferber, and take the lead up on this.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Meiran. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you, Melissa, for organizing this. And thank you all for attending here. Thank you, everybody who are live with us. So my name is Moshe. I manage the local chapter for the Cloud Security Alliance. And I'm also, for the last 10 years, I've been involved in research, creating knowledge, doing thought leadership around the topic of cloud, starting from being an entrepreneur about 10 years ago, where we started building on top of public cloud. I was really excited from the opportunities. Before the cloud, we used to imagine that we have the infrastructure that we need. We used to borrow computers from my grandmother and put it in the cabinet beneath the sink and pretend that we have an infrastructure. And suddenly AWS kicked in, and later Azure and GCP, and gave us a lot of options. So I was really excited about this, and this is what I do for the last 10 years. Helping to create best practices around cloud security. And later on, I will share some of the things that we do in the Cloud Security Alliance for helping startups doing everything that they need in the environment of cloud. The Cloud Security Alliance is a non-profit organization, community-driven community of volunteers that are creating best practices, and that's in short. For today, in a couple of minutes, I will talk about what we're going to talk today. We have basically 3 topics, starting from the basics of compliance and moving it all the way to a business advantage. But first of all, let's introduce our speakers, starting from you, Demi.
Hi. So I'm Demi Ben-Ari. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of Panorays. And what do we do with Panorays? Basically, the whole topic around third-party security risk management, and in general, having the workflow of audit processes with third parties that any company in the world today kind of engages with. It comes from the world, firstly, of real security and being worried about all of the other entities that are involved in the processes that we provide as companies, as the products that we're providing, and also from the world of compliance and data privacy regulations, in which we will speak about that a lot today, are basically boiling down to security controls and security frameworks, and also like different kinds of control frameworks that we're handling. One among of them is SOC 2. And all these processes are handled in a SaaS platform that our customers, from the largest enterprises in the world to even small startup companies, are leveraging to be able to do business in a much more secure manner. And all of that is basically provided to any security practitioners, maybe even risk managers that want to do this process and actually got this responsibility to do these processes on the onboarding of new entities, third parties, and also on the ongoing monitoring on all of these third parties.
Okay, so looking forward to hearing insights from you, from your customers, and from your work. Also know that you're speaking a lot, so thank you for your contribution to the community. Gal, introduce yourself.
So happy to be here. I'm Gal. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Recolabs. We are still in stealth mode, so I can't share what exactly we are doing, but basically we are a collaboration security solution. And today we're happy to share my experience with the Scytale team. And we just got the report, the SOC 2 report, and now we are doing the process of ISO 27001. That's me. Prior Recolabs, I served 9 years at the Prime Minister office. I was the head of vulnerability research, and now I'm one of the founders of Recolabs.
Okay, so looking forward to hearing from your experience about the SOC 2 process. And Meiran, our host for today, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm the CEO of Scytale, and what we do, we automate security compliance, mainly for startups or SaaS companies. And helping them navigate through the early stage of startups, building the infrastructure and controls and actually all of the automations and compliance infrastructure that preparing them for growth and saving them lots of time and bringing our expertise to supporting their journey. So this is what we do, and happy to be here, and also maybe giving some insight from my experience for people in companies that are looking forward for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and some other certification that's relevant for any SaaS company.
Okay, so let's begin by framing this discussion. Compliance is a big word. We are mostly framing this discussion into startup companies, young companies, who are doing some software as a service. Software as a service, basically they build their own software and they're also operating it, and they're making this software accessible to customers. Naturally, SaaS companies who are oriented corporates, enterprises, business application, B2B, are more focused on compliance. Why? Because this is requirement from the customers. So this will be our discussion, how we can help those companies. And starting from the beginning, what is the motivation? Well, first of all, let's frame the terms. SaaS providers, they are the providers, and they are selling into customers. Okay, so when I say customer, I mean the guys that are buying your software. Okay, I guess everybody here are some kind of selling software as a service or something similar. So customers, they're not looking for compliance. First of all, they're looking for how to trust you. They're looking for trust. Compliance is one of those pillars of trust. And basically, they're looking at you and they want to know if they can really trust their valuable information in your hands. You are, as the provider, you're controlling of their royal jewelry, their assets. Basically, they put a lot of responsibility on your hands while they remain accountable. If something happens to your data, the regulator and the customer will first come to you, to the customers, to the guys that put the data in your software as a service, so they are accountable, and this is why they're looking for providers who they can trust. Now, trust is a big word. For guys who come from the technical side of things, it's something that you cannot evaluate. How do you evaluate trust? So let's try to break this into smaller words. Basically, customers are looking for, first of all, transparency. How do you protect my data? And I don't want to hear buzzwords like we use defense in depth or something like that. I want to know how you're protecting my data. What do you do? What do I have to do? What tools do you use? I want to make sure that you are transparent with me, so I know everything. Second, I'm looking for assurance. Assurance, again, it's a big word. It's hard to define. I want to look in the eyes of this guys that is sitting next to me and trying to sell me the services and say, okay, I think I can trust you guys. I think you're doing the right things. I think you are competent in your knowledge. You understand the environment, you understand the risk, you understand the value of the information that I give you to handle. So, this is the assurance. I want to make sure that if something happens, you will be first transparent with me about what happened. Second, you will know what to do. This is the assurance and competency. So those are very big words. And in order to build this entire ladder, because you cannot just say, okay, trust me, you need to build them in layers. And the first layer is compliance. Why is compliance? Because once you're compliant to something, to a regulation, in a moment we'll throw in the SOC 2 into that, it basically says that, okay, there are X things that I'm doing, you don't have to ask me about it. Somebody else already did it, and now we can start work on the most important things. How do we build this first level, this first step, this first pillar of trust? Usually customers are looking for two types of certification, SOC 2, which is the topic of discussion, or ISO 27001. US customers probably will look for SOC 2. Financial organizations will probably look for SOC 2. EU customers will probably prefer ISO 27001, but there's no one rule. I mean, it's dependent on the sector, on the person that is requesting the compliance efforts, and this is basically your foundation. Nobody will ever, not highly regulated industry and fintech industry probably will not be talking to you before you do the certification. And by the way, we have the example here. We have a startup here that is still in stealth mode and still working on those two certifications, even in stealth mode. In the past, we saw providers that are mature and large, and then now they start working on the ISO. Now we see startups that are doing it from the day one, from the fact that they are stealth. This shows how important it is. Now, after all this framing and all of these discussions, let's focus on, we're basically building our discussion starting from SOC 2, and then we talk about how to elevate this into not only doing the minimal, but elevate compliance into business advantage. This will be our discussion for today. And Demi, let's start with you. Let's talk about what do you think SOC 2 solves things, and how do you see this root of trust or trust in cloud providers?
Sure. So cloud providers is one type of an entity that we'll be engaging with, especially like you said, we'll be giving them firstly maybe our data to hold, maintain, do some kind of service, or maybe they will be connected to our internal systems, different kinds of other SaaS solutions, and it becomes a mesh. And because of that, we need to kind of like withhold some kind of threshold of basic cybersecurity practices. And I will be even more radical and say not if something happens, when something happens, because something eventually will happen, and then how to respond. So all of the different kind of control frameworks that we kind of like handle, and you can take even NIST as a control framework, and different kinds of certifications like we mentioned with ISO 27001 and also SOC 2. These are all practices or living guidelines, even if they're not certified by a certified authority that actually gives you a stamp. These are basic tools for us, for security practitioners, for risk managers to actually have to kind of like lay down the ground basis to having a security program. And this comes back, like ISO 27001 basically is an ISMS, okay, an information security management system. And there is kind of like a correlation between different kinds of controls that we're implementing in ISO and also with SOC 2. Like it's 70% almost the same, right? Because these things are the basic things that security practitioners in the world during the course of history kind of defined as the basic thing that you need to do to withhold some kind of security threshold. And once we go there, and again, in a matter of maturity, this I think kind of shifted in the past, I would say 10 plus years, that to even do basic business with customers and actually sell your product, you need to get there because of all of the different kinds of breaches that occur today in the world. And we kind of see that. We will speak about that, I think, in a few, like the 20 minutes from now, about different kinds of breaches that also occurred, and third-party breaches, especially of services that we're using. So if we as companies do not achieve some kind of maturity, even in the early stages, without even anybody using the product, it will be much harder to actually implement all of these processes when you're a larger company. And this is like super hard to get that. I literally heard about different kinds of customers and companies that did not have that in the beginning, got to a point in which they were like 150 people, okay? And then they needed to achieve SOC 2. That's hell. Yeah. Literally, after achieving that, I think half of the company wanted to quit because it's hard. But when you start early with all of these things, with basic guidelines, basic things to actually implement on the day-to-day basis, it's much easier to actually build on top of that. Like you said, build the ground basis and build on top of that. And I'm not saying that you won't be breached or like won't be compromised, because like there is no such thing. But eventually you will know how to actually respond to things, okay? Or maybe even the blast radius will be as minimal as possible. And this is what we're trying to also achieve as a matter of like assurance and security for our customers.
Mm-hmm. So basically start with good foundation, makes it better. It's very hard to take entire the DevOps team and tell them, now start working like that with SSH. But if you start from scratch with the day one, it's easier. Gal, your experience, when do you meet SOC 2 again?
Yeah, so like every startup, we started as a guerrilla, trying to get prospects, design partner, and even when you have the trust with a potential design partner, he said, and you have a great meeting, and he said, I want to try product, he said at the end, "Oh, just send me the SOC 2 report, and we will start to work together." And you said, "All right, I need a SOC 2 report." And after you heard it like 2 or 3 times, you're calling to Meiran and said, "I need help." And and basically, this is the main driver to start the process, because in the end of the day, you want to work with customers, and you want to give to a potential design customer to try your product and to improve the product based on this feedback, and you need to start it earlier. And another thing that SOC 2 specifically helped us is to create some, I called it security by design. We are ingesting customer metadata, but still it's data of customers. And one of my biggest concern is customer data leakage. And I'm the cybersecurity expert. I'm cynical about compliances and SOC 2, but once I did it, I'm much more calm, and I feel like I can trust the process. I'm pretty sure that we did most of the firewalls and controls to reduce the risk, and security by design is much easier to implement than starting develop a solution and then implement security on top of it. That's much harder. And thanks that we started earlier with it, we have like security by design, and today we have like around 7-8 design partners, and some of them are customers. And when I present the SOC 2 report, and when I basically describe our cloud deployment, they said, "All right, so you did a good job, and you're secured, and I can trust you." And I feel like the SOC 2 helped us to create the framework and how to present it, what to present to the potential customers, and basically this is the main driver for a stealth startup. And we'll talk about it later, but it also helped us to be more organized and to be ready for growth, for the blitzscaling.
Okay. We'll talk
stage.
about the next phase, but I really connected to the security by design. I mean, you start a sales cycle, and you have so many barriers that you need to pass and so many people to convince, and then you're so close to the end, and they tell you, "We're just going to do a small penetration test of your product." And then if you didn't do security by design, you are so worried because so much work can be done. I mean, it also can happen when you do security by design, but at least you know you did everything you can. But get a sales cycle that is so long and then it's stuck because of vulnerability, this is devastating for everybody in the process, also for the customer trust. Meiran, give us some couple of tips about SOC 2 and how should startup implement it and when?
So when it's a good question, I think many times, in many cases, I see it's come from mainly three types of scenarios. One, it's coming from investors. Investor has a portfolio of companies, and they know that this company, because they are SaaS, B2B, have some business activity in the United States, and it's only a matter of time. Second, it's that these are maybe experienced founders, and they know what they are adding and where they are going, and they know that it's also only a matter of time, and they need to start on their compliance because they don't want to put any constraints or block the sales. And this is something that can block sales. And definitely you don't want to be there if you working in a competitive environment, You have some competitors, and you don't want to hold back while your competitors can pass through the security department fast and continue with their sales cycle. And third, I get to see this from startups that actually trying to make sales or find some design partners. And in these cases, they are required to supply a SOC 2. And sometimes it's only one requirement out of a very long security questionnaires as part of their vendor risk assessment, in which I think Demi can also share more information about that. But SOC 2 or ISO 27001 is a mandatory requirement. So I think for startup, it's most important to understand, to make the decision in what time of their journey they are planning to implement SOC 2, and maybe receiving the final report, because it's going to take approximately 6 months from start until they get in the certification, the report examination actually. And who's going to be the owner within the company? Is it going to be the CTO? Is it going to be a CISO? Is it going to be the DevOps manager? Or who's going to lead the efforts internally in the company? And third, how they plan to navigate through this process. Maybe they want to learn this by themselves and manage this internally. Maybe they want to bring some assistance from the outside. It can be through technology, it can be through expertise, but they really need to understand what they are planning ahead. I think the most critical part of it is time. No startup really has, the time is a luxury usually. Yeah. And you're working from day to night and weekends, and it's very demanding, and every second is really matter. So saving time, I think this is the most priority, and getting successful result as part of their SOC 2, and which is also very important, because people need to understand that they can also get a qualified opinion or adverse opinion, which this is basically a negative auditor's opinion, and they can only do retest after 6 months. So they don't want to get there, because they want to just send good report and going on with the sales cycle and bringing this company to be their customer. So I think this is important.
Perfect. So moving on, we said that, okay, as foundation, you need to have SOC 2, otherwise customer will probably not be able to talk to you. So from what we learn here, there's a big change. I mean, a couple of years ago, when we talk about compliance, everybody will what? It's a tick of the box. Let's mark this. Okay, we have SOC 2. Let's move on. It's not part of our business. It's only slowing us down. It's requirements that are not relevant to what we do. And we see this shift in the mindset, where compliance can help us achieve our goals. And this is the mindset that I want to give to our audience. I mean, compliance can help you reduce sales cycles. Compliance can help you in creating trust. Compliance can help you in your accountability from your customers. And most importantly, compliance can help you bring more customers and create business advantage. This is where we're going with the discussion. I want to say a couple of words about where startup meets compliance and how Cloud Security Alliance can help you. And then we talk a little bit more about how to use compliance better. So first of all, a couple of years ago, me and some other very talented folks here in Israel, we wrote a cloud security for startups guidelines. How is it different from any other security guidelines? There are tons of security checklists. We built it according to the founding rounds of a startup. What do you do in seed round when you have X amount of money, and what do you do in the second round, and in round A and in round B? And this is how you build your security, and where you should invest, and why you should invest at this point. So this is just Google Cloud Security Alliance, Cloud Security for Startups, and use it. It's a very, again, I think this is a very good. I'm getting good feedback for this document.
It is.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm an external entity that says it.
Also, we are planning a version 2 of this, so clear up some time to help us in building it. Second, every SaaS startup knows this situation. You get a lot of questionnaires, Excel spreadsheets from 100 questions to 10,000 questions. And sometimes mature companies will have 3 or 4 people only answering those questionnaires. One thing that the CSA do is, the Cloud Security Alliance is doing, is templating those questionnaires. So when you get from one bank a questionnaire that looks A, from different bank a questionnaire that looks like B, and you can tell them, okay, I'm using this format. It's called the CAKE, the Consensus Assessment Initiative Questionnaire. It's a known template for the Cloud Security Alliance. It's covering all the certification and all the privacy laws that you need. It has tons of control. First of all, take a look at it. If there's a question that you want to ask and it's not here, feel free to ask it. But first of all, take a look at this template. And this saves a lot of work for many startups, and not all customers accepting it. But again, it's a market education. It's in the process, so use it in your daily life. Second, every startup needs to comply to many certifications depending on the market sector and the regulation and the geographic location and everything else. We just mentioned SOC 2 and ISO 271, but there are lots of more certifications. What the Cloud Security Alliance is basically mapping those standards into one Excel spreadsheet. It's called the Cloud Control Matrix. Mm-hmm. And Demi mentioned that ISO 271 and SOC 2 probably have 70%, you said? Give or take. Yeah, I would say a little bit more. But again, when you look at the work that the CSA is doing, you see that we managed to map about 30 different standards into 136 questions. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a big similarity. And this way it allows you to work on one control list. And then you say, okay, now I can be compliant to ISO 271, SOC 2, PCI, FedRAMP, and a list of things. So free tools from the Cloud Security Alliance, Google them, the Cloud Security for Startup Guidelines, the CAKE, the questionnaire. Every cloud provider in the world has a CAKE. You can find it in the Cloud Security Alliance website, and also the CCM, the Cloud Control Matrix, that helps you to understand what type of controls do you need and to what regulation you can adhere.
Demi, what is your... And I want to add something to that only. Okay. First of all, I believe that version 4.0 of the CAKE is much better, but still people haven't adopted that really vastly. And also to mention on the audit process, the Star Registry, which is also another vessel that the Cloud Security Alliance, and I think that even me as an auditor, I'm leveraging that. And it's a way for companies to take the CAKE questionnaire and self-attest on their security practices and work with, we are also partnered with the Cloud Security Alliance facilitating the processes. So we're working closely with the product itself to actually combine the flows. And another thing that customers are, and even everybody, it's free for use for everybody. Cloud providers, SaaS providers, self-attest and answer the CAKE questionnaire, come to the CSA and actually get the official certification of the CSA and do that on an annual basis at least to kind of recertify themselves. And every potential customer can actually download this public information about the security practices of any third-party SaaS application, cloud provider, etc. So, per product, which is also important to also mention. And it's an effort, like you said, to do a due process and show that you're doing well in the manner of cybersecurity practices with your company and specific products that you want to also do. So it's another extra notch that you can take to take that and translate that to another type of certification. Again, mostly because it started from building trust. And I think it's a really good tool for companies that are even want to show their security maturity to be as part of the ecosystem of the Star Registry.
Okay, I wasn't aware that you go on that deep into the CSA work, but
I'm on the working groups of the continuous monitoring framework, so all of that. So yeah,
I was planning to talk about continuous monitoring in the next topic. So hold on and tell us later what you did. But tell me, continue the conversation. How can compliance help startups and not just a tick in the box? How do you see this?
Yeah. So first of all, try to understand what you're lacking in the manner of due processes internally in the company to also do things in an efficient manner and protect yourself better. Because all of these things, the security controls, the WAFs, separation of environments, all of that, well-defined development practices, and also on the aspect of different kinds of, how you put proper tools on your development environment to do that securely. These are the things that security controls mandate, but eventually it protects you. all of the vectors, attack vectors that today like really vast in the industry of supply chain attacks, open source tools that are being breached and compromised, different kinds of cloud providers that you haven't configured well, and because of that you were breached, and then your customer data is compromised. All of these things are things that the security control frameworks like SOC 2, like ISO, mandate for you to do a due process. Right now, you also will understand what are the entities involved, like Meiran mentioned. Who is in charge of that? Let's say you took the DevSecOps to be in charge of the security compliance, right? Right now, you understand that maybe you're lacking different kinds of tools to get visibility on your own environment. Like, as an example, how you provision and deprovision users. These are the loose ends that eventually hackers take exploitation of, right? So all of these things might look annoying to an early stage startup with 10 people, but eventually, if you don't do that in 10 people, you lose yourself. And that's the thing that we were doing, I think, the 4th consecutive year of our SOC 2 certification. And you can see that. You can see the maturity. By the way, the company grows, right? Practices need to change. Whatever fits you when you're like 10, 20, 30 people does not fit you when you're a global company with hundreds of people, right? And maybe a tool like Panorays can answer a lot of security controls, even in the certification when you're 30 people, when you're 100 people, but eventually when you're 5,000 more, it doesn't answer, like vulnerability management as an example, or different kinds of things that we can answer when you're in a certain type of service, for mostly cloud-based. But if you're an on-prem solution and eventually all of your engagement with customers in on-prem environments, probably we won't do a really good job in that aspect. So all of these considerations need to be taken in a certain point in time, especially like you've mentioned, after raising the seed, after you're raising the A round, because you raised it probably because your company grew, hopefully, okay? And you're not selling there. but eventually, as the company grows, you need to mature yourself with different kinds of security practices, and even following different kinds of data privacy regulations according to the geolocation that you're selling to. And this needs to fit to different kinds of control frameworks.
Okay. Gal, can you share us some insights on how compliance made your company better?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that it's make you much more efficient as a company, and it's prepare the organization for scale. To move from the gorilla of 5-10 employees to 30. Now we are 35. And it helps you to create processes such as hiring processes, onboarding processes, and you as a founder and CTO, you can distribute the role, and you can distribute the accountability to other leaders in the organization, and it helps you to grow as a company much faster. And 2 examples that I have. One is a computer was stolen from a DevOps engineer, and thanks to the Jump Cloud Agent, the encryptions, the MFA, it took 5 minutes to resolve the issue. And I don't want to think what happened if the computer was not encrypted and without MFA.
The reports to the regulator, questions from customers, notification from customers. Yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah, so it was easy. It was just money, and close the issue in 5 minutes. I just order a new computer, and that's all.
There's a punishment given the old one.
And the second example is you're in we had an A round, and one of the VC asked for policies, and I said yes, we have all of the policies. Just send them, and it's not only for customers, it's also for investors. When you have like a corporate VC or a big VC, and they ask for policies that are not related to just for security, also for processes in the organization, specifically for HR or third-party management. So we've just shared with them, and the fund round was quick thanks to that. So this is, and the third example that I have now is that developers loves to complain, and if you implementing the MFA, shorter expiration time for session cookies, or any other policy that you implement for security, or to connect between Jira ticket to PR. It's much easier to do it when you are 5-10 developers, and when you add more and more developers, no one asks question why they're doing it, and if you are doing it after 1 year of engineering process, it's really hard and
change existing habits.
Yes, and for developers specifically, it's much more harder
than any other human beings.
Yes.
Okay, Meiran, you want to share with us how you help customers even scale compliance into better company, better product?
Yeah, of course. So just a disclaimer, because Gal was discussing about a case that he lost his laptop, and luckily the laptop was encrypted, and maybe he could delete it remotely, and no very bad high risk on that case. So I think many times I see startups and companies asking me, do I really have to implement an agent on my computers? I don't believe in this. It's just a waste of money. I don't want it. I don't believe in the value of antivirus. I don't need antivirus. I don't really need agents. Sometimes it's saying, I don't really think I need to encrypt the computer because it's going to slow it down. So it's real things that I'm hearing from customers. And sometimes they do understand why it's important. And that is mainly, it's not only because of compliance. It's not only because you need to check the box and say that all laptops are encrypted. Once you have a very, let's say, terminated employee, and he might be very frustrated, and if you don't have the ability to lock the computer remotely, and that might be a problem. If you lost the computer, and this is a developer computer or finance team computer or any computer basically, what data does it hold inside? Who knows, like, which files did it download to the computer and which files remain in the cloud, even though that you disabling all access. So it still can be very scary to be in this situation. You don't want to get there. You want to have the control in order to reduce the risk to acceptable level. I think everything is about measurement and reducing the risks. And my tip for startups when starting the journey is, first of all, build the controls that customize and correct for you. Because as Demi said before, the beginning of the company, and when you 100 employees and when you 1,000 employees and when you 100,000 employees, it's different. And the beginning, everyone may walk in the same room, and when you want access, you just asking your friend, hey, can you bring me access to the AWS instance, and that's it. And afterwards, you want to manage access, so you can start managing through tickets, and maybe then you want to grant access automatically, but for a temporary amount of time. And you want to streamline the process, that everything will be efficient, managed, documented, and safe. And I think building a compliance and a controls that actually suits for you, and not a fixed list that someone else telling you, look, this is what you should do. But maybe you don't have SSH access for your production environment. Maybe you don't use VPN. Maybe, I don't know, you don't have remote employees and you don't need to bring your own device policy. It really depends for the company. So mainly in order to build compliance that's correct for you, for your company, for your situation, in early stages, I would recommend keep it lean. You don't have maybe to implement a very sophisticated source code vulnerability tools when you 10 employees. But when you have R&D of 20 people, 50 people, it's becoming a risk because you start feeling like you're losing control. You don't know what's going in the code like you used to know 2 years before, because you don't have only one team. Now we have 2 teams or 5 teams, and this is integration and different kinds of teams. And it's also correct because of compliance. This is also what vendors are going to ask from you, and because they want to reduce their risk from your company. And also you will feel safer once you're going to implement all of these controls. You're really gonna, I felt myself safer, and with this startup, with Scytale, and I'm sure that everyone, even though no one likes to actually do compliance, and we want to move fast and not let the compliance hold business back, but actually it's really important for scaling, for closing rounds, for selling your products, and also with your legal commitments for customer. It can be part of the master service level agreement. It can be part of the data protection agreement. It can be part of your privacy policy. It's endless. So build something that works for you. This is my tip. And second tip is whatever that could be automated, try to automate it, because manage so many things all the time. It's frustrating. Everyone of us know that if you could do something that just works and maybe remind you or maybe collect data so you don't need to ask someone else to send you the data, that's going to really help and streamline the process, make it easier, and save lots of time.
Okay. So we started by understanding that you must have some kind of compliance or SOC 2 in order to do business. Then we said, okay, it's not just a tick in the box. I mean, it's not just okay, I'm done. It can give you a business benefit. I mean, it can make you more organized, reduce life cycle. Now I'm also saying that you can use compliance in order to gain business advantage over your competitors. And I give you a couple of examples. We said that the minimum that we need is SOC 2, is a concern one, but there are more advanced certification. For instance, if you're the first one in your sector that has the FedRAMP certification, it means that you can sell to the US government. It's not easy to get a FedRAMP certification. It's a very rigid, very strict certification. So again, you can get business advantage over your competitors, but not only from a sector point of view. A couple of years ago, Dropbox realized that they're losing the competition in the enterprise for Box.com. Box.com was more oriented to enterprises. Dropbox was more oriented to regular consumers. So what they did, they rebuilt themselves. They created Dropbox for enterprise, and they said that we are the first ones to implement ISO 2717 and ISO 2718. Those were new standards. Those are standards for cloud providers. So they are considered to be more rigid and more advanced. And then again, we are doing more. We are doing more the advanced exercise, the advanced certification, so we can get business advantage over our competitors. Many certifications and many best practices today are leading us to something that is called continuous monitoring. Demi was mentioning it. What's the idea? And currently certification are once a year. I mean, SOC 2, you do this once a year. So between the first date and the next annual date, you don't know what's happening. More and more best practices and methodologies are pushing you for continuous monitoring. Why do I need to do this once a year? Let's streamline the number of servers that I have patched. Let's streamline the amount of servers that I have encrypted. Let's streamline all my compliance controls. I mean, the relevant ones. Not all of them should be in real time. I mean, sometimes the control is, did you check your documents? I mean, this could be done every couple of months, not every night. But some of the controls can be implemented on daily and hourly basis. So again, it's a competitive advantage. My competitor is saying that he's doing SOC 2 every once a year. I'm going to give you all the controls in SOC 2 in a dashboard on every night that you want to see, if you want to verify my compliance status. So again, getting a business advantage, reducing sales cycle, making yourself more significant over your competitors. So this is how I want you to look at compliance, something that can get you business advantage. From your experience, Demi?
Yeah, and mentioning also not only on the aspect of doing in a much more efficient manner, sales, etc., and all of that, it's mostly like called sales enablement, business enablement. And for that, you have also part of the functionality of Panorays, but I mean, like in general, you would like to do that again, self-attest in the easiest way possible, meaning because of that, I mentioned also the star registry, which is also an important like part of doing another thing that brings the trust, right? Creating an open channel of communication. If you can create a platform with you and your customers to kind of share that information in an easier way, it's better, right? And creating that attestation also on the website. A lot of times when I'm evaluating any third party that we'll be engaging with, first of all, I look how the company actually looks from the outside, because this is exactly the way that hackers will look at it, right? And eventually try to explore their security page, different kinds of self-attestations on the aspect of data privacy also. If you're public with your DPA, with your different kinds of like if you're following different kinds of data privacy regulations globally also, it means that you're aware. You want to like actively share that. And also on the other way around, protecting that security information in the best way possible. As an example, if somebody actually a vendor shares a SOC 2 report with me without an NDA that we've signed between us, I know that they have malpractices in their cybersecurity practices. This means that they're exposing their most confidential information, and they're attesting that they have confidentiality with anybody. What does that tell you? Okay? Because somebody is actually not doing a process according to the best practices that they have defined they're attesting to, right? So probably I won't adopt that vendor. And again, it's a risk-based approach. If that vendor is providing a lot of value to me, maybe I will do a higher touch with them, right? I will try to understand why this gap actually occurred. But if they're providing nothing or like not a lot of value to my business, again, different context, right? Maybe I don't need them. You know how many like tools the marketing department wants to onboard weekly? Tools, different kinds of engagements, etc. And different security practitioners actually like that are enabling that type of access to the organization are helpless, because right now they can't even track that. And because of that, kind of what you mentioned about the continuous monitoring process and actually understanding and having also tools, and there are a lot of startup companies and even larger companies that go in that, how you're discovering shadow IT or different kinds of, services that you're plugging into your environment. It ramped up the whole like industry of third-party SaaS application security, meaning all of the SaaS applications that you have a ton of plugins to, whatever they're connected to your environment. So all of that is the whole like aspect of supply chain security, supply chain vulnerabilities, etc., because you don't have control over them. 20 years back, 30 years back, maybe even more, CISOs used to say, I'm a safe silo. I'm in my data center. I protected my data center according to all of the best practices. You can't penetrate me. Assuming that lie is correct. Right now, basically, you're giving away your data and access to your environment to a ton of third-party entities, right? So, again, to lower the risk and create something, again, in a risk-based approach, you have to have these processes. Even ISO and SOC 2 and all of these different kinds of security control frameworks mandate that you have to do that on your sub-processors and critical infrastructure pieces, right? Because they understand that eventually it's a whole picture that you kind of need to define. And by creating these practices, and how annoying it sounds to do compliance, maybe even sometimes boring, this brings you to some threshold in which you've implemented all of these security controls to be able to actually feel confident even doing business in a secure manner.
Perfect. Gal, you want to share something? How do you think you can scale compliance to business advantage?
So the young startup started to work with Israeli companies, and then you want to move to the US to work with US customers, even from a cold calls. And as you said at the beginning, trust is something that you need to deploy any SaaS application. And when you're starting the engagement with the prospect, one of the first questions is SOC 2, and then we're sharing it with them, and it reduced the sales cycle, it built the trust, and moreover, most of from my experience with the financial institution, they have a vendor assessment, and the SOC 2 and ISO helps you to fill also these assessments quickly. Just today, I had the pleasure to fill a vendor assessment with another financial institution, and it took me like less than a day, thanks to all the policies and processes and evidence that we already have. We shared it with them, and they just send me an email now that we are all set and we can continue to the next step. So it helps you also in the vendor assessment, and because contribute to your maturity, you can scale the number of customers, and even with from cold calls, and not only with warm introduction, you can trust him, try his product.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Meiran,
Yeah.
you want to share how business can scale compliance into business advantage and marketing advantage?
Yeah, definitely. As they said, I think that compliance is as an integral part of your whole strategy of scaling sales, and this might block some sales. And definitely, if you're a startup and you plan to sell in the US market, most certainly that you will need to do SOC 2. It's only a matter of time of when. And if you plan to sell in Europe, maybe it's going to be ISO 27001. So, it's only a question of time. Now, after you start, most likely it's just going to add up. Every year you're going to add, maybe every year you're going to add some more frameworks. It's going to be SOC 2. Year afterwards, you plan to start making sales in Europe. So you add in ISO 27001. And then you have the privacy regulation, which this is regardless of your security certifications. Now, it really depends on your product. If you're in the healthcare, in the payments, in planning to sell for federal agencies, maybe you have some business in China or in Australia, and they have their own security certification. So this is basically this is a customer requirement. Second, that can build a competitive advantage over the competition. And third, it's really build a robust security program, information security program, that actually can support when company grow and more employees join in the company. You have the correct procedure in managing this in scale. And we have one customer, they grew from 40 or 50 employees to 600 employees. And worldwide, globally, it's very difficult to manage buying computer, giving access, managing onboarding process, and terminating employees, millions of tasks that you need to do. So this is why I find as a compliance, as a business enabler, and actually supporting companies' growth.
I hope our customers template the employee permission, not the employee themselves.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a different business.
Yeah.
Okay. So wrapping things up, we are getting to the end of our session. So we started by saying that you must have SOC 2 in order to people to start talking to you, customer talking to you. But it's not only a tick box. You don't do this just for okay, I have SOC 2. You can use it for creating better company, better security, reduce sales cycle, and finally do business advantage over your competitors and customers. Happy to take any other questions, and guys, in a second we'll get to you to final words. So think about what you want to share. If we have any questions, Melissa, do we have something in the chat?
I think you guys answered this already, but when is the right time to start SOC 2? Like only when customers ask, or should you really?
So repeat the question, because I think you can't hear that.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. The question is, what is the best timing for SOC 2? Many companies are waiting for the compliance process until, okay, the customer requests that, and then they're running in panic to Meiran and asking, Meiran, we need to do this tomorrow morning. Yeah, so we touched this a little bit, but want to hear from your opinion, maybe?
I think that when you're close to your MVP, your minimal version, and you're going to deploy it to a customer, then you have the part of your product, and you already you choose a cloud provider, and I think and you started to work with Jira, GitHub, and etc. I think this is the right time, probably like after 3 to 5 months since you're starting.
Okay, I would say that I'll give you 3 points that will make you want to do this faster. It's dependent on who you're selling to. Highly regulated entities will require this faster before regular enterprises, for instance. Second, the type of data that you keep. Okay, health information, financial records. You will have to get to SOC to faster than if you're storing, I don't know, just regular IT data, for instance. And third, how intrusive you are. I mean, some companies will put a widget in somebody's website, very intrusive. Some companies will run into their customers, will run an agent into their customer data center, again, but very intrusive. So this will also be a trigger that you need to do compliance faster, again, faster than companies who are not intrusive. And I want to ask you guys a question, and again, we touched it a little bit. Who is the owner of the compliance process in the organization? Is it, I mean, theoretically CISO, but sometimes companies don't have a CISO, right? When they're doing SOC. So anybody wants to answer this? Demi, you want to do this?
I think it depends. I know it's an annoying answer, but it depends on the size of the company and responsibility. I would say a recommendation would be for an entity that is as external as possible to the day-to-day. As an example, VP R&D, that might be the founder of a company of 20, 30 people, maybe he's the one or she's the one that's supposed to run the process, but you'd rather have somebody that is external, maybe the COO, or some entity that's kind of like detached from the day-to-day basis of the R&D, to be able to be the kind of like the internal auditor. Okay, as an example, at Panorays, I'm not managing the R&D, and it's much easier for me to be in charge of our security practices because I'm being judgmental to their practices. And he said developers are that way. Great. Like the auditor will come and do a process with my own company, I'm trying to do the same. And it's much easier to actually reflect the practices that we have in the company to be able to do proper security, right? And again, I know that it kind of like paints you as the bad guy, as the one that actually like interferes with the day-to-day, but this is exactly what we're trying to achieve here, to be judgmental on our own security practices to implement better security. So in that aspect, it should be as external as possible, but eventually there is reality. And it's supposed to be somebody that is actually aware as much as possible to development, to technology, because we're doing these processes on our products. And because of that, we should focus on that aspect because this is more important. And again, try to be as judgmental as possible. Wear different hats. Me as Demi, as the CTO of the founder, and when I ran the R&D, I still tried to wear the hat of the CISO, which did not exist. And I was also like in charge of security. Sometimes you can take a consultant, okay, and a virtual CISO, what's called today in the industry, and somebody that actually defines processes, right? And somebody else needs to implement. There are different various practices in the maturity of the company, maturity of the product, where you're at, and of course, funds. It eventually boils down to amount of money that you invest, like everything, okay? So it boils down to that.
Final words. We start with you, Meiran.
If you in your startup, so I would recommend thinking up right from the beginning. If you're already a grown-up startup and you in a growth or scale stage, and most likely there is a professional expert managing this in the company, so it's very important to do this right. And also CISOs are very busy people, so work effective. and know where to put your time and efforts. And thank you very much for joining me. And thank you, Gal and Demi and Moshe. Thank you, everyone. And maybe Gal, Demi, if you want.
Last word?
Yeah, I recommend it to a friend. The same. It's if you want to be mature, do it. Like start a SOC 2 process even without the report, because it helps your organization, it helps you, it helps to the R&D department to be more mature and to be more effective in the long term. In the short term, it's hard, but in the long term, it makes your organization scalable and ready for, I call it, to the blitz scaling.
Demi?
Yeah, I kind of like said that and during the whole like answering questions and everything. Be as transparent and judgmental as possible to your security practices, especially from day one, even when you're 3-4 people and then growing, because it will help you to adjust better. And then when you like adopt practices, which somebody actually like pretty smart probably thought about that in the beginning, because of that, these things, again, it sounds bad, compliance was created around that, then you will have at least like basic guidelines to how to achieve that end goal. And again, it boils down to doing sales, okay, doing business relationships, and doing the day-to-day of what we're doing in a secure manner.
Perfect. So my last word would be what I started with. Customers are not looking for compliance, they're looking for trust. They want to look at you and say, okay, I trust you. In order to achieve that, transparency, assurance, competency, those are the things, the feelings that you need to give them. Big words, but it's ended up in being writing everything you do and transparent about it, and being professional, which is something that we always need to aspire to do. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you find it useful, and see you at the next time that Meiran will invite us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Demi. Thank you, Gal.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.